On June 5, 1976, the Teton Dam collapsed, creating Idaho's most devastating man-made disaster. When the Teton Dam failed, 80 billion gallons of water rushed out of its reservoir with unbridled destruction. The rampaging floodwaters of the Snake River ripped through Idaho farming communities and urban areas alike. It destroyed 4,000 homes, 3,500 farm buildings, and 250 businesses. It stripped the topsoil off of 100,000 acres of farmland. 13,000 head of livestock were lost, and 11 people lost their lives. The Teton disaster is vividly etched into the minds of the people of Idaho's Upper Snake River Valley. It's reasonably quiet here now. The water's gone, and so is most of what was once the Teton Dam. For the past 7 months, a team of 9 worldwide experts has been sifting through the rubble, trying to find some answers to the big question of why it all happened, why the Teton failed. They've looked at a mountain of photographs and technical data. They've talked with engineers, geologists, and they've talked with eyewitnesses who were here the day the Teton failed. They've come up with 2 major conclusions. First, this was far from a good location for an earth-filled dam. And second, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation came up with far from a good design.
In the briefest summary, the panel concludes, 1, that the dam failed by internal erosion, we call it piping, of the core of the dam deep in the right foundation key trench, with the eroded soil particles finding exits through channels in and along the interface of the dam with a highly pervious abutment rock and talus to points at the right groin of the dam. 2, that the exit avenues were destroyed and removed by the outrush of reservoir water. 3, that openings existed through inadequately sealed rock joints and may have developed through cracks in the core zone in the key trench. 4, that once started, piping progressed rapidly through the main body of the dam and quickly led to complete failure. 5, that the design of the dam did not adequately take into account the foundation conditions and the characteristics of the soil used for filling the key trench. And 6, that construction activities conformed to the actual design in all significant aspects except scheduling.
Who was to blame for its failure?
Our panel made no effort to place names on any of the conditions which it found. We pointed out in the report the decisions which were made, which were at fault, and you'll find those around throughout the...
Decisions by the Bureau,
well, that was a designing agency and constructing agency, so it's obvious.
So you're saying then that the Bureau is to blame, since that is the designing agency?
It's hard to escape that kind of a conclusion.
The final report of the Blue Ribbon investigating team is impressive, comprehensive, and to the layman, highly confusing. It's filled with pictures, graphs, charts, and technical data. To the trained engineer, it probably contains everything there is to know about what caused the Teton Dam to fail. To the engineering critic, however, it falls short of direct, candid statements concerning specific individual blame. The chairman of the Blue Ribbon investigating team still couches his words behind diplomatic engineering terms when he's pressed for specific answers to the question of who's to blame. Can you say it was a poor site and a poor design?
No, I think you could build, you keep using that question, but I believe a safe dam could be built on that site, but not in the way that it was done. It would have to be modified to assure that it was safe with more than one line of defense.
But it all still boils down to it was a very difficult site. And
Very.
what about the design itself?
The design, if you read our point 13 and 14 in the conclusions, you'll have the best statement of that I know how to.
Although the chairman of the Blue Ribbon investigating team has some trouble finding the right words to place direct blame, there are a whole lot of people who have looked at the report, and they have no trouble at all figuring out who's to blame.
I think that the Bureau is going to take the blunt of the criticism in this report. It was designed, improperly designed for the geologic conditions that existed. I think that's my interpretation as I was briefed the last 2 days. And Mr. Chadwick couldn't say that, but I can say that. And I think the Bureau now will re-examine the safeguards that are necessary to build dams in the future, and will put the instrumentation in that needs to be placed in that dam for better review during the construction period.
The report is about 2 inches thick, and some people say that it says everything there is to say about the Teton disaster. Some people say that it doesn't really say enough. What do you get in substance from that report? What does it say to you about what caused the Teton to fail?
I thought the report was very professionally prepared. It was clear, and that the primary purpose or the primary reason for the failure was the design of the structure. That the Bureau knew about the site, knew about the problems of the site, but that the dam was not designed appropriately to take into account those problems.
Does that mean human error, miscalculation, or who do we put it at as far as fault goes? Whose door is it at?
Well, the designers either misjudged the data or perhaps didn't have the knowledge or whatever, but they simply, or didn't maybe take the necessary precautions, but we simply didn't design the thing appropriately.
It's hard for laymen to understand that the committee could come out with a report this critical of the project, you know, the site and the design, and yet for the chairman of that committee to still say you could build that same dam or a dam like it on the same site. How do you explain that?
Well, he's simply saying that there are designs that would fit that site and take care of the problems. For example, they indicated that if the key trench had been grouted, surface grouted, to take care of some of those cracks that allowed, or the crevices that allowed water to get into the key trench, that would have helped. Likewise, if they had used a different material in the dam that was more plastic and not so brittle, you would have less cracking and less place for the water to get into. And finally, they suggested that if there was a process or a means to allow that drainage that got into the dam to escape through the dam, there would not have been the erosion and the soaking up of the dam internally.
I think the important thing about it is it gives us an analysis of the final stage of failure of the Teton Dam. But I emphasize the word only the final stage of failure, because the failure of that dam preceded physical failure, and that was failure in the bureaucratic process, that is the agency, failure in Congress to get proper information to do a proper job of judging whether the project was justified or safe, and failure finally in the judicial process, because the judicial process failed to take note of the fact that the Bureau hadn't provided information about safety hazards.
There seemed to be some reluctance to get specific and to couch the language a bit in the report. What do you think it really says?
I think the report says that the Bureau failed almost at every stage in building this thing. In design, it did not say they failed in construction, but I think even that question may be open to some question, because Corps of Engineers reports have found that the grouting was incomplete, and incomplete grouting may have been a contributing factor to the physical failure of this dam. So it was a bad site, and I don't see how anyone could say with absolute certainty that you could have built a dam there again that would be safe. I certainly wouldn't want to live underneath it.
Director Higginson, you were kind of the Idaho man on the Special Blue Ribbon Committee that investigated what made the Teton fail. I know you don't like the title watchdog, but obviously Governor Andrus put you on that committee to make sure that Idaho was getting a fair shake from the committee, and they really did look for the truth. Yesterday, the chairman had a little trouble when he was sort of couching his language on what really happened at the dam. A lot of newsmen said it was a poor site and a poor design. Are those bad semantics?
I would say that the site is a poor site. I'm not willing to say that a safe dam could not have been built at that site. But given the site and the conditions of the site, particularly the highly jointed fractured bedrock, the design was poor.
What about the fact of there are some people who say that there was human error involved, that there was bad judgment, that the Bureau really didn't do its job?
I think that's a correct summation of what we found, that given the site conditions and given the material available to build a dam, there were some human errors in judgment made in selecting a design that did not adequately take into consideration the problems encountered at that site.
What about the construction phase itself? Are you confident that the contractors did everything they should have done?
Essentially, the panel has concluded, and I certainly agree with that the contractors did the job according to the plans and specifications provided to them by the government designers, and the only problem that there may have been encountered was that they were behind schedule with regard to certain phases of the construction, particularly the river outlet works.
What does it really say as far as you're concerned?
Well, the bottom line simply says that the fault of the cause of the failure over there was poor engineering.
What about the design itself and the site?
Well, those are within the report, Sal, but they said that the design was the wrong design, the site was the wrong site for that design, and there was a lot of pretty language in it, but it boiled down to one simple conclusion, that the failure of the Teton Dam was caused by an error in judgment of the Bureau of Reclamation. The fault lies at their door.
Amazingly enough, there's substantial public support in eastern Idaho to rebuild Teton Dam. A survey sponsored by Idaho East Magazine and conducted by Ricks College provides a vivid example of that fact. 215 families, predominantly from the Rexburg area, were interviewed on the question of rebuilding Teton Dam. 55% of them favor the idea. If the dam is rebuilt, 68% of the interviewees would favor a new site. Those statistics are remarkable when you consider that Rexburg was one of the cities hardest hit by the Teton disaster. In addition to the loss of human life, homes, and livestock, some 200 downtown businesses suffered major damage. It was the kind of site that would have prompted most people to give the town up as a lost cause. But the people who live here refused to do that. They stayed. They dug out of the mud and the slime, and they reclaimed their town. Today, some 7 months after the collapse of the Teton Dam, Rexburg is a revitalized boomtown. Now it's some 7 months after the Teton disaster. How do the people of Rexburg feel about everything right now?
I'm sure that they're enthusiastic and their spirits are high because we've done a real job, I think, of getting back to seeking normalcy. There's about 85% of the businesses in Rexburg are back operating, and many more of them are close to getting back into business. There've been very few who have left or closed up and told us that they weren't going to make it. And the thing that really is encouraging to all of us, those that are back in business have discovered that their business is a lot better than it was a year ago. One fellow told me today that his December business was 27% over a year ago, and that's pretty general. Most of them that I've talked to have all had gains, some not that much, and maybe some more, I don't know. But it's really good because a lot of this money that the Bureau has been giving people is going into savings accounts. And they, because of the shortage of contractors, why, they just can't build immediately, and so it's drawing interest, and some of them have never had a big bank account before, and so I think maybe their spending at Christmas was a little above normal.
So in addition to being a disaster, the Teton also brought prosperity to Rexburg.
Yes, but that's a hard way to get it.
Mayor Porter, some 6 months ago when things were really bad here in Rexburg and people were still digging out, even then there was support to rebuild the Teton Dam. Is that true today?
I'm sure it's true today. We have a problem in the area here. That's why the dam was built in the first place. We've got a flood problem in the spring when there's a runoff. Why, as you know, the Teton River heads up in the Teton Mountains. They're steep, there's a lot of snow there. If it's real warm, why, we have a runoff and we have a flood situation. That's why the dam was built, not only to provide flood protection, but also for irrigation. We have problems here in some areas where they need supplemental water. I don't know, it'd be hard to say about if you take a vote, how the vote would come out. There have been polls taken, and it shows that there's a lot of sentiment for rebuilding a dam. But I'm sure that everyone wants to make sure that it's going to be a structure that won't wash out again. And the fact that the Bureau of Reclamation has built 250 earthen dams, and they've held, and even we're still living under dams that the Bureau has built, and if they'd break, it'd be just as bad as the Teton Dam. We've got the one at Island Park, and we've got the one at Palisade, and they can both flood this area if they ever broke. And I don't think there's any chance of them breaking.
And yet the Blue Ribbon panel says that this particular dam that did break was at a bad location, and it was a bad design.
That's right, and probably there should have been more input, more thought given to it, and there were a lot of people who opposed it. Not a lot, very few. A lot of us wanted it. I was one of them. I fought to have the dam built. The reason that I did was because I had no thought that any dam that the Bureau built would ever break, because it hadn't ever happened before.
There are a lot of people who want another dam, if not in that site, somewhere along that site.
Yes, they are. And they're used to asking for dams. They're used to getting federal money to build them. I think perhaps the key question would be, would any private individual or a consortium of private individuals be willing to pay for it themselves? And of course, the answer to that is always no.
Do you think it's likely that another dam will be built at that site?
I think that's very speculative at this point. I think a number of questions are going to have to be resolved. One, whether it will take another act of Congress to authorize reconstruction of a dam. If not, it certainly would take additional appropriations from the Congress if the Bureau is to proceed with another dam. I'm sure that there will have to be a lot of cost estimates run as to what are you going to have to do. Do you have to remove all of the material that's there, keeping in mind that there are still 6 million cubic yards of the original dam that are still in place? Does all of that have to be removed before you put in another dam with a different design? Many questions that have to be resolved, and question of whether it will ever be rebuilt, I think, is too early right now.
Do you think Congress is really likely to come loose with enough money to build one again?
I really don't know. They've paid for this dam twice. It's unlikely they would pay for it a third time. But I think Senator Church and others have said they're going to hold hearings over there and make that determination. And I'd like to see the outcome of those hearings, and particularly what the people who have suffered because of this failure, what they feel about it.
It's a little hard for you, since you haven't been confirmed yet as Secretary of Interior, to really speak out, because you'd just be asking for a lot of trouble if you do. But looking ahead to the future, and after you are confirmed, if there is another dam project, you're the man who's going to sit at the top of it. Will you scrutinize it pretty heavily?
Well, I think that would be the understatement of the week. If the Congress and the people in that area determine that there shall be a dam of some type, I would suspect that it would be the most closely scrutinized and dam that was ever built in America. But that's a decision that has to be made down the road.
After Congress is paid to construct it and still paying because it didn't stay constructed, do you think they're likely to come up with the money a third time?
I really think that depends a whole lot on how much support there is, how much enthusiasm there is to replace the dam. And Congress does represent the people, and if there is enough support for that, they may decide to rebuild it.
From a standpoint of reality, do you think that the Teton Dam will ever be rebuilt exactly in the same site?
Well, I'm not sure. That would depend a lot on what the designers look at. If it is, rebuilt sometime and they decide to rebuild it, the designers have to look at that site versus other sites and what kind of designs would fit the site. and they may even want to confer further with the panel if they decide to design a dam to fit that site again.
We asked that question to Mr. Courtright and Mr. Higginson, and both of them said that it is a feasible site. I have not come to the conclusion whether I would support that. One of the things that Mr. Higginson pointed out, he said we've got to examine every site very carefully, and of course justify it economically and environmentally. And if we can justify them on those kind of bases and pay for the dam through the use of that water, they should be constructed. As far as me supporting that, Wayne, I'm not at this time.
The panel concluded that a safe dam could have been built at that site, but it would take an entirely radically different design than the Bureau used.
There's no chance of that unless a new dam could be built with a certainty that it would succeed, and unless the people in the floodplain below the dam were to favor its reconstruction. Even then, there would be problems in the Congress because of the enormity of the calamity and the great cost to the government in restoring the lands and furnishing damages to the flood victims.
In your estimation, is there a design that is possible that would still put a dam in there again?
I'm sure there is, but there's one condition that has to be noted. It might cost more money than you'd want to pay for it.
What is all this going to mean as far as the Bureau of Reclamation? Do you look for a revamping, a little closer stair-stepping of inspections and that sort of thing to try to make sure that this never does happen again?
Yeah, this has already been brought out in the discussions with Secretary Kleppe and Gil Stam and the others, that the Bureau of Reclamation will start having outside supervision, overview of all proposals in the future, just as a protective device to see that this doesn't happen. But they've built well over 300 dams throughout America to date, Sal. That number is obviously going to not accelerate as it has in the past. So they would have that opportunity. There's a lot of expertise in the Bureau of Reclamation. Our local man, Rod Vizia here, is an outstanding example of the new breed, to where they're willing to look beyond just irrigation water on the rivers. So I think you'll see a change of direction of philosophy within the Bureau of Reclamation also.
In the wake of the Blue Ribbon Panel's report, what do you think is going to happen to the system itself within the Bureau of Reclamation for designing and constructing dams?
Well, the Commissioner's already announced 3 steps that he's taking now, and that's that he hopes to have, or he will have, an independent panel review the designs and specifications of all major dams before they're constructed in the future. Another thing that we will do is add more instrumentation to dams so that we know what's going on in the dam during construction, during the filling period, and during the operation of the project. And finally, he's going to improve the communication system between the designers in Denver and the construction offices wherever they are.
What do you think the big lesson is that can be learned from the Teton disaster?
Well, I think maybe, if anything, we've learned a lesson about perhaps overconfidence. We were told on a number of occasions by Bureau personnel that the reason they didn't do certain things is because they had built enough dams, that they had experience and confidence in their design, that they didn't think there was any need for it. And I think we have learned that there's no way that you can become overconfident because of past success in construction of dams of this nature.
I think the lesson is obvious, but I think the thing that we learned from it more than anything else was the ability of the American and Idaho people to overcome a disaster like that. The heroics of the people that were directly affected and those people around them who helped them was just outstanding, and it shows you that the same feelings and philosophy that built America are still there in our people today.
About 5 months ago, I asked you if they came to you personally and they said, well, we're going to rebuild that dam right where it stands. Do you remember what you told me you'd say?
Yes, I remember. I told you that I'd suggested it be put farther back and maybe not as large.
they came to you today and they said, we're going to build it in the same spot, what would you say?
I'd tell them the same thing.
But you do think you need a dam?
I think that the dam should be rebuilt, and I think that it eventually will be, because there is a need for it.
The Teton Dam was to have been a 30-story high monument to modern engineering techniques. Instead, it's an engineering black mark. But in view of the final recommendations of the Blue Ribbon investigating team, perhaps the Teton disaster can yet serve a useful purpose. Perhaps it can be the catalyst for a complete revamping of the engineering system that built it and a rethinking of the political climate that clamored for its final construction. Sal Celeski reporting for Newsbeat 7.